You are on the rant couch where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one is for John, who says, rant about Apple. Things to consider: iPods, iTunes, iPhone slash iPad slash iOS, AirPods, Mac computers slash Final Cut Pro, the Apple credit card, how expensive these things are, Apple fanboys, Steve Jobs, how they were the first $1 trillion company. I'm an Apple fanboy, but I love it when people shit all over the company. Keeps me out of my bubble, you know? Well, I'm glad you like that, because that's where I'm going to go. Because I've had more experience with Apple than you might think for somebody who's not using any Apple products currently. I am not, because I don't like them. And I think that's not necessarily a common conclusion to come to. I think most people just never interact with Mac products, either because they are expensive or because they are just like too weird and different. And a lot of people have used the iPhone because it was the first one, and so it's always maintained a pretty fair share of the market. But like Android has grown to such a point where there are so many like flagship Android phones. You've got Google, Samsung, fucking LG, even like all competing directly with the iPhone. So I don't think it has like a market. Like I don't think it has half the market the way it once did. But it still has a huge market, especially overseas. And so you know the Apple brand is strong, but it's not like the strongest it's ever been because it's not at the forefront in the way that it was right up until Steve Jobs' death. And it's kind of just been holding position and doing the same kind of thing it was doing and not really coming up with something mind-blowingly new. But they finally have ticked some of the boxes people have been waiting for, like the new Mac Pro. So like they're making upward progress, just not in the crazy leaps and bounds that I think Steve Jobs was usually aiming for by like creating some completely innovative new piece of technology. And like undeniably, he was an important part of getting that done, but like he took a lot of his tech from going to, was it IBM or Hewlett Packard, that he took a tour of and like realized that they were using computers like in a much more advanced way than he had thought was possible, but they didn't realize the potential of what they had, like what they had built. And when he realized that potential, he, developed his operating system on the basis of that. Well, then you have Microsoft, which swoops in and just kind of reinterprets a lot of the iconography of the Mac for themselves as they create Windows. And there's very different design philosophies behind both because the Mac is a very controlled environment experience. It's there for you to do what a Mac is built to be able to do, and with the specs that it has. And with Windows, it's always been that this is a PC you can modify, you can add things to it, you can fuck around with it, you can add things to the OS. There's tons of brands that their computers work with Windows. Windows is just it's not connected to the hardware necessarily. So like it is insofar as you can't run iOS on anything other than a Mac. But like, the the Windows can go on all kinds of different computers from all kinds of different companies. So it's just way more versatile. So that's why it's way more popular. And it pretty much was immediately. But like, Mac fans have always had a bitter problem with PC because the Mac had been revolutionary for its time, and the PC ripped off so many elements of its basic user interface. And they ripped off what was originally the trash can and made it the recycle bin, which is ironic because the recycle bin is the more iconic version, even though it's clearly like second fiddle. Like they obviously would have made it the trash bin if not for the fact that Apple already had the trash bin, and they still do. And like the the main font used on the Apple was a font called Helvetica, which is considered to be like one of the industry standard fonts for sans serif. And they had, bought the rights to use that font. Microsoft created a font called Arial that is basically a shitty bastardization of Helvetica, which they used as their official font, and because they made it themselves, they didn't have to pay any licensing fees, and it was distinctive from the Mac. So this is the extent they went to basically copy what the Mac had done as closely as possible in its interface choices, because the Mac's interface choices were good, but Windows was just taking a different approach to creating an operating system software, and one that was a lot more successful. So Mac fans have always hated PC, especially because PC does not out of the box work as well as a Mac does. If you just buy a Mac, it is perfect at doing everything a Mac is supposed to do, and particularly in the 90s and early 2000s, the Adobe programs and Final Cut Pro, which was mentioned in this post, all worked better on a Mac. And so it was seen as the industry standard for doing creative work. And the PC could be more powerful if you modified it. So the nerds were always going to favor PC over Mac because you can't get into a Mac. Everything's proprietary. You can't add to it. The only way that the Mac can provide you something that is worthy of the highest level of work is if they make a new Mac Pro and it has the top of the line specs imaginable across the board. They make the ultimate nerd computer, and they make it under their very simplistic design philosophy. So if you have the money to throw down on a Mac Pro, it's a great computer, but again, you have to basically be in the Mac interface. You have to want to use Final Cut. It's why somebody like MKBHD continues to use those computers, because he's a Final Cut editor, and that's just what he wants to use, is the highest level computing power from Mac. So, I can respect all that, but I hate using Mac computers. And my first exposure, aside from using them a little bit in school, the first time I had to really use it was because my parents had bought my brother Victor a Mac computer. One of the ones that's just a screen with a computer inside of it kind of thing. The sleek designs from the late 2000s when they had gotten rid of the whole back of the computer. And they bought it for him for his birthday, and they had specifically been talked into it because of the photo studio and video studio, because it had a built-in webcam, and the fact that it had GarageBand. And they thought, oh, we'll do creative things with that stuff. The creative potential of those programs is extremely limited. They are fun to play with a little bit. But this was the era of being able to download illegal shit. If we had had a PC that had, that worked well, because we had my mom's old shitty PC and my PC that had been ruined by viruses and couldn't access the internet. And we never thought to, just get that fixed if at all possible, which I'm sure it was. But this Mac was basically the best computer in the house now that it was here. I think my mom got a computer upgrade around the same time, but it was, nothing fancy. It was basically a browsing computer, not one that could do heavy duty stuff. We did edit early videos through, Windows Movie Maker on that computer. But and that was kind of what we graduated to because of the fact that the inboard video editing software on the Mac was shit. It was really bad. It was worse than Windows Movie Maker to play with, But it had the advantage of there's a camera built into the mount on it. So I did make some videos with the head-mounted camera on the Mac of us playing with action figures and shit and making a storyline. And just a lot of weird comedy karaoke videos. But my brother couldn't read, so he was not going to use this Mac regularly. I would come into his room and watch anime on his computer 3 episodes before school, 3 episodes after school, when I was 16 and getting back into anime. I basically commandeered this computer because over that summer, we decided to set up a Genshiken in my room where we had brought everybody's anime, everybody's manga, everybody's video games all up to my room and set up multiple TVs so we could play multiple games at once. We did that for a few nights, and then everybody's shit just kind of got left in my room, including Victor's computer. His computer was just left in my room because I was just using it way more than he was. And he was completely wrapped up in the PS3, you know? So I'm using this computer because it's the best computer I have access to, but it's a pain in the ass because I can't get certain things that I want on it that are, you know, only for fucking PC, particularly video games. And like that was the main reason Victor had wanted a computer. He wanted it so he could play video games. So my parents buying him a Mac, worst possible decision they could have made because he's not going to play any video games on it. All he ended up playing was the PS3 for this whole era. I took his computer because all you could play on it was WoW. So that's all he got was WoW. And he had fun with WoW for a while, and then when he was done with WoW, he was done with the computer. So I had it, and I wanted to play games with my friends, but, you know, couldn't really play anything because it's a fucking Mac. And the fucking mouse doesn't have a right click inherently. Like, you can set it to have one, but it's a weird, awkward gesture you have to make. I don't know why. I don't know why they feel the need to make it, like, the mouse is shittier. It is less easy to use. I don't understand why they would make a shittier mouse. I don't understand why that is their protocol. Like, that is the thing about Mac that baffles me, is that they, in the name of doing things the way they want it to be, they have denied the natural course of innovation that everyone else has taken. Their mouses made sense at a time, and they're shitty now. Because nobody uses keyboard shortcuts and commands. Because nobody can memorize all of them. And like, at a time when only professionals were using computers, they really had it drilled into their heads that they needed to work as fast and efficiently as possible, and keyboard commands let you do that. And so, like, to really be professional, you need to use a Mac, use all the keyboard commands that are all the same across all the programs, and, like, that is the fixation, you know? But, like, it's so much easier to have a right-click button because it only takes a fraction of a second longer and you don't have to memorize 1,000 fucking keyboard commands, you know? So, like, when I was in class in college, we had to use fucking Macs. And they were these big-ass, like, fucking 1440p Macs that had, you know, gigantic screens. And we would use, you know, I had a graphic design class where we used fucking Illustrator. I had a class where we used InDesign, always on giant Macs. And my teacher for the graphic design class was a huge Mac fangirl. She was like a boomer, like an older woman who, maybe not a boomer, but like, you know, she was fairly old. And she had been a professional in the business for a long time, so she had this seething hatred for Microsoft for the fact that they had ripped off the fucking typography from the other place, and like she would just go on these long rants about why like Microsoft sucks and you should use Macs if you're a real professional. And like she was really strict about us learning the keyboard commands, and she like kept reprimanding me for the fact that I would come into class and immediately set up the right click on my mouse because I was used to doing this shit on the internet. I was used to editing. I was used to like doing this kind of stuff. So it's not like this was new to me. You know, I didn't feel the need to do it at like the speed where you fucking learn all the keyboard commands because I was not going to get a Mac. I was not going to use it again. You know. Not being able to do shit on Victor's old Mac sucked, and like once I got it replaced, I was much happier having Windows, and was much more open to do more things. You know, get Steam, download 100 games. Like, yeah, it's way cooler. So, I don't know if things are still that bad for Mac gamers. You know, maybe more stuff gets brought out on Mac. I have no idea. But, like, that's the furthest extent of my experience using the main computers. Using the laptop, my dad had a Mac laptop, like, one of the, not super thin, but like a thin Mac laptop from 2008 or 9 that had an amazing fucking trackpad on it that I love to use. A great keyboard, so I liked using this laptop a whole lot. But I basically only used it to, like, write scripts on and occasionally when I was away from my computer. And eventually a crowbar fell on it, and the screen broke. So that laptop is gone now. But I enjoyed using the Mac laptop just because I wasn't trying to do anything too crazy on it anyways. And, you know, the keyboard and trackpad were fantastic. I wouldn't buy another one for myself because they're just so fucking expensive. And then, you know, I had an iPod Touch for a while, and I've had like an iPod Micro. I've had a bunch of little iPods over the years because my dad would just get them for free when he would do business trips and stuff. I never had a problem with the iPods. I enjoyed using them. You know, I pretty much just used them to play music and use like Notepad and shit on the iPod Touch. I loved using the iPod Touch in my first year of college because I didn't have a smartphone yet. So I just fucking played around on that thing all the time. And then when I finally got a smartphone, it was like a hand-me-down iPhone 3 from Victor or something like that. And I didn't really... I fucking hated it because I don't think they're intuitive. I think the iPhone layout sucks. I think, like, not having a fucking back button, like, dedicated on the bottom of the screen is obnoxious. Because I think, like, you know, I'm playing on a computer, you know? So I just hate using the iPhone. And then when I found out when I was at work one day at Target that you could play video games, once again, on the fucking Android phone through emulators, and I saw somebody playing Mario 64 on their fucking phone, and I was like, I'm getting a fucking Samsung. So I got the Note 3, and I never looked back at iPhone. I was like, fuck that, you can't even emulate on that thing, it's inherently inferior. It can do, like, 30% less of what I would want it to do. And I did play some emulated games on phones back then, but I don't really anymore. So, like, yeah. Would I consider using Apple products? I might consider using their laptop if one was like fell into my hands for some reason. iTunes is a fucking nightmare. I think they finally got rid of it, but that is another big reason not to use one of their fucking phones or even the iPods, because like I would much rather just load all my shit onto an Android phone, obviously. Like just throw all my fucking MP3s on there and not have to worry about it. Apple credit card just seems like a meme. The expensiveness is a big part of why I wouldn't buy them. I mean, if they were the cheaper laptops, of course I'd buy them. But, yeah. Them being the first $1 trillion company, crazy. I didn't know they were ever the biggest company in the world, but I guess they were for some moment in time. Anyway, that's all for this rant. This went on pretty long.